hugely exciting, I hope, session on public knowledge and private learning. We'll just get the last few latecomers to come in. If you can take your seats very quickly, it'd be much appreciated. And if I can ask you, ladies and gentlemen, please to switch off your mobile phones. Heresy in today's world, but quite important if you want to have an hour of reasonably uninterrupted conversation. Thank you very much. And I should do the same myself, actually, having lectured everyone here. There we go. So my name is Ehsan Masood. I'm delighted to be here. I haven't been to Karachi for about 5 years. And I'm a science journalist based in the United Kingdom, and I've worked for many different magazines, mostly at the interface of science and technology policy. So wherever there's money to be found and scientists to be paid, you'll probably see me either with my notebook flashing or on the end of a phone or harassing or haranguing somebody. If I can ask our latecomers to come in quickly. Thank you. And just to be clear, there's an awful lot of really exciting talks going on, and so we are all here for public knowledge, private learning. Thank you very much. So when Oxford University Press and the British Council were thinking of a session for that had a kind of science and higher education sort of bias, the question that we thought we could ask all of you and the panel to consider, which is very much the theme of this session, is what is the role of the state in education, and particularly given the interests of the panel, what is the role of the state in higher education? Because we're now in a world where states, whether it's in Pakistan or other countries in this region, or whether they are in Western Europe or the United States, they are cutting back on their budgets, and they're cutting back uniformly 15 or 20%. There's sort of quite severe austerity underway everywhere. And one of the impacts, of course, is on the education system, and that's doing two things. It's obviously changing the nature of the relationship between the state and education providers, and it's also opening up opportunities for entrepreneurs and for the private sector. I work myself for a private publishing company, and it's paradoxical, but we've been growing in the last 4 or 5 years at the same time as when there've been cutbacks, certainly in the state. Wow, we are busy. Can I ask you all to very quickly take your seats? Thank you. So, just to introduce our very distinguished panel, I'm going to start with my left here. I'm going to hazard a guess and say, Faisal, that you're the youngest out of all of us, this very gender-balanced panel, incidentally. But at least age is on your side here. So we probably ticked one box fairly well. Faisal Mushtaq, as you will all know better than I, is the founder and the executive director of the Roots School System. It's the third largest of the private providers that are now in this country. And he's also the founding chief executive of an NGO called Change in Education. Faisal is a former management consultant who worked in London for companies such as PricewaterhouseCoopers and IBM, but he says his passion is education. The Roots School System was founded in 1988. It has around 90 campuses, and Faisal's website, the website says you're a young national icon, and I'm sure that's a very well-deserved reputation. So, to my right, I have Dr. Aasim Sajjad Akhtar. Aasim teaches at the Quaid-e-Azam University in Islamabad. He is, I think it's probably fair to say, Aasim, a critic of the state, no friend to multinationals, and I've heard you say, or I've read you say, the buck starts and stops at patriarchy and capitalism. That's a fair assessment of where you come at this story from. And if you haven't read him, I'm sure you have, but just in case you haven't, you can read him in The Dawn. I certainly read him online. And last but not least, we have quite possibly our most distinguished panelist here, which is Dr. Ishrat Husain, currently the Dean of IBA, the Institute of Business Administration at the University of Karachi, and he's been there since 2008. Better known, I suspect, to most people outside of this building, anyone at least who has a wallet and a banknote, as the central banker. Dr. Ishrat was the governor of the State Bank from 1999 to 2005. He trained in the civil service and also spent a period working for the World Bank, particularly, I guess notably, I'm sure you had many assignments there. The one that stands out for me was that you were running structural adjustment in Africa, which I think was lots of lessons from that period to the structural adjustment that particularly the European economies are now experiencing. And it's a different session, different topic, but certainly one that I really wanted our audience to highlight. So there we are. I've asked all of our panelists to think of make an opening statement of 3 or 4 minutes, and then we can kind of get underway with some questions. And we'd very much like to invite all of you in the audience to have your say, to ask your comments, to explain your thoughts. The one thing I just say is tell us who you are, tell us where you're from, so it helps to give us all a bit of a sense of your perspective, and please be brief. And if you're not going to be brief, I might have to resort to an element of linguistic brutalization, but hopefully we won't need that. So let's start with Faisal. What is the role of the state in education? And you obviously come at it from a particular point of view. I guess the question for you would be: is the role quite a minimal one?
Thank you, Ehsan, and thank you everybody for being here this afternoon. The role of the state in education, it is a very broad question. I think to allow me to answer this question
in 4 minutes.
In 4 minutes as well. Now, when we talk about education in Pakistan, we need to see education in 3 different manifestations. One is literacy. The other one is education itself, and that is teaching and learning. The third one is higher education. So, a lot of people, we get a little confused when we talk about education from the holistic perspective. So literacy should be taken as a different subject, education itself, that is the schooling, K-12, and then, of course, the higher education, and then post-higher education. I don't want to get into the jobs and the skills mindset. Education started in 1979 after the denationalization of education. The state educational share and the missionary educational standards of the country, they're very high. And not to our surprise, majority of the leadership the nation has produced even today is all coming out of the public schools and those great missionary schools with education close to values, morality, and the concept of social contract between the state and the citizenry. Now, post-1979, there's been a vacuum, both in terms of quality, standards, and access, and then vacuum was filled in slowly and gradually by the private sector. And that's where you saw the mushroom growth of private schoolings, which includes the root schools, the Beacon House, the city schools, and so on and so forth. And then slowly and gradually what we saw that education has always been a provincial subject when it came to the primary and secondary level. But very recently, after the 18th Amendment education, now the colleges, and totally it's a provincial subject. As per the NFC, the provinces are responsible for this delivery, standards, quality assurance, and even now to their own curriculum and research. To me, the bridging educational gap is far more a reality. The world is committed to the Millennium Development Goals, which Pakistan is signatory to, and 2015 we are nowhere close to the universalization of primary education, and what to talk about gender equality. More than 20 million children out of 70 million, almost 20 million, there's a research and a survey, they're out of school children, they come out of Pakistan. Now, is education an urban elite phenomena? No, it is a rural-urban phenomena. There is a school, there's a community school, there's a state school, there's an NGO school, there is a one-child school, there's formal education, non-formal education, madrasa education, religious education. So there's a school in Tandwala Yar for ₹50 a month, and there's a school in Lahore for $1,000.
First, can I just interrupt you for 1 minute, which is that what would you like the government to do for you?
Three things, if you want to be specific.
Thing, yeah.
Three things. I would like my government to have these 3 things, and my story is a story of skill, will, and bill. First, the government should use all the skills that it has at the provincial level. It must pay the bill for building the capacity of the schools at the provincial level, which they have. The public school teacher still gets a better salary as compared to the private school. The rest is all jazz and a fashion statement that the public school teachers are not privileged. And 3, the skill, the will, the political will, the social will, the economic will, the academic will, the will to be a part of a member of the global committee of nations with values imbued and close to citizenry responsibility. My friends, we are a country of 200 million subjects, but to transfer those subjects into citizenship, the citizenry demands literacy as the single common denominator to be successful in a so-called 21st century.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, and thank you for keeping to time. Thank you so much. Dr. Ishrat, skill, will, and bill. I like that. You're a poet, amongst other things, obviously. Would you agree with Faisal's characterization?
Well, I think generally he's right, but let me preface by saying that the challenge of education in this country is so enormous that just to rely on one actor, which is the state, and which has not done so well as far as the provision and delivery of education is concerned, would be a wrong thing to do. Responsibility to make sure that every citizen of Pakistan has access to affordable education, has equality of opportunity for educating their children, is that of the state, no doubt about it. And Article 25A of the Constitution clearly defines that. Now, the state can have other roles also, which is the role of a regulator, of an enabler, of a financier. And there are some low-cost, good quality private schools, NGO schools, and community schools which can provide higher quality education to the families of the poor persons. You should make sure that the state provides them stipends, scholarships, financing facilities so that they can go and learn at that school. If the government school is better, they should go to the government school. But introducing this competition for quality and providing access to everybody, irrespective of their financial means, is something which I personally think is required. And the state can do it. My own work for 2 years on the governance reforms, which took me from Dera Ismail Khan all the way to Gwadar, shows that we have serious structural problems in the delivery of the public sector education.
We'll definitely come to that.
And we have to address those issues if we want the state to play a more beneficial and a more benign role as far as the education delivery, access, and quality is concerned.
Thank you very much. And really, same question, Aasim, to you. What would you say is the role of the state? And would you agree that it's about ensuring quality and access? I quite like that, quality and access.
You know, I have to be honest with you. I find this. I find the sort of there's an adage almost within urban, especially urban, educated middle class circles. You know, the bane of this country's the bane of this country is feudalism, and there's illiteracy. You know, there's a whole business about literacy. But we've had a state for the last 65 years, and I would suggest we go even further back, that has used education, state education, as ideology. So I don't really want, I'm not interested in this kind of education. So if we preface this question of quality and literacy with a look at this whole notion as that education and state education functions as ideology, then I'm willing to go along with the story. As far as sort of the post-1979, which for me is the neoliberal turn, right? Like, let's hand over everything to the market. I mean, that is, for me, is an obvious, is the wrong answer. Is part of why we've gotten into we've exacerbated an already existing problem. We have a state that is essentially colonial in nature, teaches us not to think and not be critical, and to hate India and hate the enemy, and that's all that education means to a certain extent. And then perhaps, fulfill certain social roles as well. And then we've exacerbated that by saying, okay, well, now let's let's take whatever resources and potential control to mold, sort of ordinary people into human beings, and we've handed that over to the market. So we've got a two-pronged problem here. So in the event that anyone is confused, I'm not at all a proponent of taking education away from the state. In fact, I'm very much a proponent of the state taking care of universal education and making it free. But I also think that we need to spend some time and dedicate more time to thinking about what the state is doing when it educates its people. I mean, what kind of culture and ideology are we imparting? And I think it's quite obvious. And I don't think it's fair to say that it's just the state. I taught at the private sector university in this country for the best part of a decade. And there was enough India-hating, completely uncritical people there too to make me think that the private sector doesn't necessarily do a better job of imparting the right message and the right education, and makes us just as much ideological subjects as the state does.
Thank you for that. I know my two colleagues are going to want to come back in a minute, but let's maybe get some questions from our distinguished audience who'd like to tell us what they think in very general terms, because we're going to go into a little bit more detail in the next round. But let's just start with some opening comments or any opening ideas about what is the role of a government, what is the role of the state. Yes, the gentleman there with the luxurious moustache who's unfortunately sitting down so you can't see him. Tell us your name and where you're from. Would you like to stand up, sir? Thank you. Okay.
My name is Shai Siddiqui, and thanks very much for this intro. I think one way of, as Faisal put it, that if you increase the literacy, problems will be solved. I think it's a very simplistic view of literacy. Literacy per se is not development. But I think I would like to agree with what Aasim said, that what kind of education? That is a very important question. And post 1979, I think we see a neoliberal model of education where lots of chains of schools are there, and the whole emphasis on maximization of profit and exploitation of teachers. And the kind of education which is being given there, the whole emphasis on skills, and there is less emphasis on critical thinking. So I think this kind of education is not going to do any good to a society where there are lots of taboos and they need to be checked. So my take is that it's not the enhancing the literacy, but the quality of, and this slogan that education for all, I don't agree with that. What kind of education? Because there is a difference between a person who is taking a degree from Ehsan, and there's a difference between a student who is taking a degree from a school from Mandi Bahauti. So it's the quality of education, and that is very important. That if we give opportunity, equal opportunities, as Ishrat said, of quality education for all.
Thank you very much for that point. Very well made. Let's just take one more, and then I'm going to come back. Yes, the lady there with the glasses in the second row. Do you want to raise your hand? There we go. Microphone, chap. Thank you. Oh, it's not working. Ah, that's the problem.
My name is Faisal, and I graduated from LUMS last year, the year before actually, 2012, and now I'm a fellow for Teach for Pakistan. So I teach in a government school called Rana Liaquat in Ibrahim. It's a very low-income community in Karachi. My question is regarding awareness. So we've talked about a lot of things that we feel that the government should be doing. But what about awareness? What about the bill that was passed by the Pakistan National Assembly that parents failing to send their children to school will be charged with 25,000 rupees and 3 months in prison? So my question is, do Pakistanis even know that? Does a common Pakistani man know this? And why is awareness not actually a problem that we ever talk about?
Thank you very much. And there's another hand, just lady at the very back. Yep, go ahead. I think.
So I teach in Swami, that is one state policy for education that universal apply for all. What are the merits of it versus merits of local education initiatives?
Thank you. Let's, Faisal, why don't you come to the first one? And there've been sort of several I guess, not very
You know, if
sort of mentions of neoliberal education, maximizing profit, skills being emphasized against thinking and so on. Where do you sit on that?
Thank you. I've got a number of my teachers and mentors sitting here, starting with Dr. Ishrat and Irfan Siddiqui, Saab himself, Husain. So, sir, please do forgive me if your student says something. Because I do teaching and learning, and I manage classrooms. And also I had this passion that why state fails to deliver and so on and so forth. So many years ago, I set up my own non-profit, non-governmental organization. At the moment, I'm working with 250 government schools. I'm working in D.I. Khan, I'm working in Nushaira, I work in Gotki, I work in Tandola Yar, Tamma Muhammad Khan, and Kila Saifullah, Pasni, and many other cities. Trust me, I've been to World Economic Forum, all the jazz about curriculum, content, pedagogy, ideology, perspective, skills, values, knowledge, assessment, examination, standards. This is not a realistic discussion in Pakistan today. I may be the youngest. I know I may get a lot of beatings saying that. This is an opportunistic discussion. You have no idea what the standard and the quality and the access to and the missing facilities that exist in the schools today. Even the schools in Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad, we are struggling with the provision of electricity and safety and security. First, get your children out to schools. First, let's focus on literacy. Then bring that intellectual, ideological debate about state, citizenry, values, curriculum, and standards. Let's first get the teachers to school. Let's first rehabilitate the school. I am not confused that the first challenge is getting children out and sending children to schools. First is literacy. And then comes, of course, quality standards, that are we creating those skills, knowledge, and values within that, and so on and so forth. But to tell you the truth, after 18th Amendment, it's much larger a challenge because the provinces are autonomous. They can represent their own ideology. You're going to see so very soon. And it, to me, is the beginning of a new era, not promoting federation, but promoting their own perspective, regional and cultural ideologies.
Dr. Ishrat, yes, go ahead.
Let me address the question of localization. I am convinced that Pakistan's backward districts, and there are 80 districts, which are poverty of opportunity, as I call them. They cannot progress, they will remain backward unless we devolve the basic services of education, health, drinking water supply, sanitation to the local governments. If we don't do that, if everything is centralized from Karachi, Lahore, Peshawar, and Quetta, we will perpetuate these disparities. I give you one example, which will just tell you how pernicious is this national pay scales. In a girls' school in Lorelei, the science female teacher gets herself transferred along with her post to Quetta, and there is nobody to teach those girls science subjects. In Quetta, you find there are 5 science teachers. 4 of them are sitting idle with only 30 girls in their class. How can you continue to have a national pay scale where a person in Quetta is given the same salary, same incentives as somebody in Avaran or Lorelei or Musa Khel? You have to empower the local governments to determine, according to the labor market conditions, if there is a scarcity of science female teacher, in Lorelei, pay her 20,000 rupees. And in Quetta, if you have excess supply, pay them 10,000 rupees. That's the only way you will be able to reduce this huge disparity which has perpetuated because of the poverty of opportunity in this country. And that's why this devolution from federal to provincial is incomplete unless it is devolved from the provinces to the districts.
Aasim, can I just get you to maybe address Faisal's point? Because I can sort of detect there's obviously a bit of a... can you hear me now? Is that a bit better? Okay. Aasim, could I get you to just respond to Faisal's point about the priority being getting children into schools, and then the kind of pedagogy, the thinking skills, all of that kind of comes in, but the core objective is to first get children into schools?
I have no problem getting children to schools. I think that's great. I'm not sure why it's either or, why these are mutually exclusive objectives. I find that quite troubling, actually, to suggest that it's fashionable to suggest that it's fashionable to talk about the fact that education is ideology. It's not fashionable. It's the truth. Education is ideology. You might not like it, or you might pretend that's not the case, but it is. It's ideology. It teaches you to be competitive. My kid, 5 years old, I don't teach him to come home from school and tell me, oh, I got this number of marks, and the other kid got this number of marks. I'd like him to think, and to go and think about education as learning, not as competition, not as who I should like and dislike from an early age, not as whether someone's color or religion makes them lesser or better. I mean, I don't understand why this should come later. And we should get, 80 million kids out into school, make them talking, walking robots, and then say, oh, let's worry later, because those kids are the ones who come to us in public universities at 21 years old and have no critical faculties. And they come and take our entrance exams, and they are taught that Pakistan ki bunyad 712 mein rakhi gayi. Mohammed bin Qasim hamara qawmi hero hai. I mean, it's really time to move on from this, and it's time that someone started saying that we need to focus on this without deflecting attention from it by saying, well, first we need to get people out. We can get people out into schools. The teachers that Ishrat Saab is talking about, the teachers are ill-equipped so even if we manage to get a situation, sort of get the logistics sorted, or get the questions of incentives sorted, and make sure that everybody goes and delivers the service or fulfills their role in whatever underserviced area, they're still going to be telling the kids to go stand in a corner and do this, unless they can recite or regurgitate what's in the terrible textbook, which says दूसरी जमात की किताब है, हर अच्छा पाकिस्तानी मुसलमान है. I mean, come on, there's no way you can tell me that this is something that should wait for later. हर अच्छा पाकिस्तानी मुसलमान नहीं है. Right? I mean, it's really that simple. So I refuse to accept that these are mutually exclusive objectives, and one should come long after the other is sorted. Because the first one's not going to get sorted all that quickly, mind you. No matter how many non-governmental organizations, because this is the state's job, and the state, as we all agree, has not done its job. But the answer is not to say, okay, let's sort of deflect attention from all of what the state has not done, and let's go have private service providers or donors or non-governmental organizations try and fill the gap. They can't fill the gap. No one can fill the gap. No one can do what the state is supposed to do. And the first thing is to at least identify what the state is not doing, or in fact, how the state is making us into walking, talking idiots, frankly.
Hold that thought. I'm going to pose, so I want to go one level into this discussion now, and let's ask each of the panelists another question. Then I'm going to come back to the audience and see what you think. And that question is, if there was one thing, and I'll start with you, Dr. Ishrat, given your just extensive record of public service, given all your experience and the record that you've done and the meetings you've had and initiatives that you've piloted, if there was one thing that you could get the public sector to change in terms of how it does education, what would that one thing be?
It is the accountability for results at the district and the local level. There should not be any discrimination between the providers of the service, whether it is private, NGO, local government, or district government. Everybody should take part in this. And I would like to suggest that if you look at the textbooks and the curriculum of the private schools and NGOs in Punjab, even in the rural areas, they are very different from what is being taught in the public sector schools. So one of their advantages of these low-cost schools, and by the way, everybody is not going to Beacon House. There is a study,
Or the root
LEAP,
schools.
which has been done in Punjab, that 30% of the kids, even in the rural areas, are going to low-cost 50 rupees, 100 rupees, 150 rupees schools.
Yeah.
While the public sector schools, through different means, are extracting more than 200, 250 from the parents. But the quality of these schools, local community schools, NGOs, and the private sector, is much better than that of the public sector. And also what is being taught is very different from what is being taught at the public sector. So my concern is all hands on the deck, because the problem is so enormous that to leave it only to the state, or leave it to the private sector, or leave it to the NGOs, or leave it to the communities won't work. We are only 60% net enrollment ratios. We are behind African countries in today's world. If we had 100% literacy rate, 100% enrollment ratios, our standards of living would be twice as high as they are today. So we have to worry about that.
Coming to you, Faisal, you're education minister for a day. God grants you one wish. What would you like to change?
I would centralize the curriculum, and as what he talks about, the ideology and the content, and make it a mutually inclusive process. I never said that the debate that my friend was having, that it's not mutually inclusive. It is mutually inclusive, but priority number one is to get children out to schools. One thing that the state could do is to stay out of the business of anybody who wants to promote literacy, opportunity, access, and learning. And I totally agree with Dr. Ishrat Husain that the problem is so large that everybody has to contribute. And sir, there are more registered low-income private schools in Punjab as compared to the government schools. There's 60,000 registered low-income private schools which are being funded by the Punjab Education Foundation. And that was talked about recently at the World Economic Forum as well. And there are 52,000 public schools as well here in Pakistan. And I think that we really need to focus also on the content, because there's a lot of hate literature as part of the school curriculum and philosophy. If we can take that out, we can at least promote a more patriotic and a nationalistic perspective imbued with values of humanity and culture.
Aasim, same question. Maybe you're the Minister for Higher Education. I'll give you a promotion.
You know, I don't know about the Minister of Education for a day. You know, but I have to say I just disagree. I can't agree with this, because you know, I think that there is a problem here, and you can read between the lines here. If you don't see it already, then I suggest you read between the lines. Right? See, there is this notion that the state has failed, and so therefore whoever comes in and fills the gap is a good thing. I disagree. The state has failed, sure, but the state has to fill that gap. It cannot just be whoever. It cannot just be, oh, you know, if NGOs show up, if the private sector shows up. You know, I cannot agree with that. The reason I cannot agree with that is because there are certain things that we must hold as universal values, which everybody seems to agree on when we started off, that the state should be providing free education to all of the people who live within the country. That education should be of a particular quality, that education should impart particular values, that education should be non-discriminatory. It shouldn't matter what language you speak, what your religion is, what your class is, it shouldn't matter. All of these things do matter, as we know, in this country. All of these things matter. So I think that simply saying everyone who can should, I mean, in principle, that's a great idea, but I think what the principle should be, and that's, I guess, what I would say if I'm the minister, say, no, the state should be fully responsible for meeting all of the basic education needs. Insofar as there are private institutions, you know, NGOs, what have you, that want to participate in this process, fine. Yes, but the state must be responsible, must take responsibility. I don't actually agree that this curriculum should be centralized. I think it should be decentralized. I think that the one good thing that elected government does or has done in the last 5 or 6 years was the Pakhtunkhwa government's, the ANP's government's decision to allow or to actually facilitate the delivery of education in 6 different mother tongues aside from Pashto and Pakhtunkhwa. That is a very good thing. We need to think about the importance of that. And part of actually decentralizing the curriculum allows it, the curriculum, I'm not sure this is what Faisal meant, but it should not be nationalistic. It should not be sort of based on some kind of overarching, because that's particularly this Pakistani nationalism which has gotten us into this hate India and everything else will be okay. If there's a problem, I mean, I have students who come to me at university who are 22 years old, and everything that goes wrong in Pakistan, Yahuda Hunood ki sazish. So, you know, I don't think that centralizing the curriculum is the answer there. I think it's decentralizing it, maybe charting out some basic principles, sure, but
so
allowing the provinces to go about in their different languages, in their mother tongues, going about sort of articulating what sort of values they want to impart.
So can I just push you on your earlier point? And so let's say that you are the Minister for Higher Education, and Dr. Ishrat here, can't hear the mic, and Dr. Ishrat here is the Finance Minister. He's kind of your boss. He has to release the money. And you say, you know, the state has to do all of the things you'd like it to do. And Dr. Ishrat says, I'm sorry, my friend, there isn't any money in the kitty. I need to talk to Faisal.
Yeah.
He's going to help out, and he's doing all these amazing and wonderful things.
DIY, do it yourself.
Would you not then agree that there is a role, that there has to be a role, in that just in economic reality demands there has to be some role for the private providers?
Well, first, I think that Dr. Ishrat and Faisal would not hire me.
No, I'm the president. I'm the president, so I've hired you already.
I don't know about Dr. Ishrat. I don't know about Dr. Ishrat. Surely I will not.
Second, you know, why isn't there any money? I would ask. I mean, if we agree that this is one of the most fundamental priorities of any state, why isn't there any money? I mean, are you busy making Islamic bombs? By chance, for example, then stop making the Islamic bombs. You know, start redirecting all of your money to what we say is really important. Stop saying India and Afghanistan should disappear off the map of the world, and we want to simulate a 5th province, and you know, so on, so on, so forth.
Aasim needs to work to become the president.
Thank you. Let's get Faisal in, and then Dr. Ishrat. Faisal, yes, go ahead. No, you get
So I've got 2 points.
Yep.
Number one is that I think that there are 2 things. One is sympathy, other one is empathy. And I totally disagree with my friend. He should understand and realize that he is somehow obsessed by India. There is no India bashing at large by the country, and neither do anybody. We have left our security paradigm and the security state notions. Number 2, he talked about ideology. Secondly, he talked about having a provincial curriculum. So that means that 4 different ideologies are acceptable to my honorable friend, and one national patriotic ideology is not acceptable. Totally disagree to that, and I am willing to go to every extent on that. You can check. And the other thing is, Pakistan is struggling. Look at the text to GDP ratio. All the honorable audience at the Karachi Literature Festival, not many of them pay their taxes, including ourselves. You know, we hardly pay taxes in our country. The country is struggling. There is corruption. You go out over there for that fancy lunch on the boat. There is litter in the water. No services and amenities. Look at the law. The state is struggling. We have 2 options: either to complain that the state needs to be a solution provider, or to do it yourself. Let's collaborate and let's feel for the state. Let's not just have sympathy, but also empathy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let
Dr. Ishrat, yes, go ahead.
What Aasim is saying is not disagreeing. I also said the same thing, that the state must have the responsibility for education. But it's not synonymous with the delivery and the provision of education. The state should make sure that the poor of this country do not suffer because of their financial needs condition to be denied and deprived of higher education or the education. IBA is a state-owned institution. Our fees is much higher than any other public sector institutions. But 75 the students who can afford are paying us the money because the government cannot afford. But the 25% who cannot afford, it is our responsibility to take care of their financial need. We have a needs-blind admission policy. So instead of giving 100% financing, I get only 25% financing from the government, so this can be spread around. So where I disagree with him, it should not be one prescription for all. I am very concerned that for the mobility of the poor classes, you must provide them equality of opportunity. And that should come through financing, and the government should finance the poor. Not me, not him, not him. That's my point.
Thank you very much. So let's come to the audience now. Who would like to be Minister of Higher Education or Education for a day, and tell us what one thing you'd like to change? And let's make it a bit practical. Our distinguished panel here sometimes kind of veers off into the world of the conceptual. So let's have some practical suggestions from our audience. The gentleman there just in the aisle, yes, do you want to raise your hand? Tell us who you are and where you're from. You're from around here. Ali from around here. Go on then, go ahead. Are you a student or are you? Okay. And what did you study? Business studies, okay. There's a mic just behind you there, so we can grab you the mic. There we go.
Hello. The only thing that hasn't changed for forever is the way we educate. And I think like in a country like Pakistan,
No. I think you'll just have to raise your voice. I can say that.
yeah, but my question was that the only thing that hasn't been changed like in forever is how we're educated. And I think with like advances in technology, like the biggest problem Pakistan would have right now is like infrastructure and the lack of quality teachers and stuff. And with distance learning, you could sort of overcome that in a cheaper way and in a more.
But if there was one thing that your government, your provincial government or your national government could change, what would it be?
Its focus, and I'm going to speak about India as well. I mean, I don't think the topic of conversation should be whether like curriculum should be state sponsored or not. I think it should be like access to more education, and for that, like I try to find more cheaper ways in order to provide that to every child.
Okay, thank you.
About India again. So
Mobile literacy.
Just a second. They have an initiative as well. Like by 2015, they're going to be providing tablets that just cost $40 for like all.
There's an idea. Tablets at $40. Is the British Council here? Did you hear that? Tablets at $40, please. I like that. Let's get some more ideas. Yes, the gentleman in the checkered shirt.
Yeah, I'm actually, my name is Ramji Minwala. I'm the chair of the Department of Social Sciences at IBA. Hello, Dr. Ishrat. My question is really this.
Don't ask a question. Tell us what the state should do. You can always come back and ask him the question on Monday.
In relation to higher education, I would ask the state to reconsider how the HEC functions or to reconfigure how the HEC functions. In the case of primary and secondary education, I would set up a centralized accreditation body that addresses exactly the kind of curricular issues that the ideological issues that are smuggled into our curricula at the primary and secondary level, so that the work that we do in higher education becomes next to impossible.
So it's about regulation, quality, and so on. Thank you. So yes, the gentleman there, go ahead.
So if I become the minister or...
Yes, you are the minister. Right. You haven't just become the minister.
तो मैं उर्दू में जवाब देना चाहूँगा कि मैं वो सारी चीज़ें करना चाहूँगा जो आसिम साहब ने कही. And let me add to this, मैं एक यूनिवर्सिटी में इस वक्त मास्टर्स कर रहा हूँ और उसमें क्लासेस नहीं होती हैं, टीचर नहीं आते. ठीक है, बहुत डिसअपॉइंटमेंट हुई मुझे जाकर. उससे ज़्यादा डिसअपॉइंटमेंट मुझे तब हुई जब वो टीचर आया और उसने पढ़ाया.
Thank you very much. Well made. Let's get some more points. Yes, gentleman in the back.
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me?
I think you've got to move the mic really close to your mouth. Yeah. There we are.
So I would just like to reiterate whatever Aasim, your name is. Yeah, what you've been saying, and I would like to make education pertinent to the problems and issues we are facing as a society at large. Something that is designed to tackle all of that and to provide solutions to this plethora of issues we are facing at a national level. I'd just like to give an example. We have been at a state of war for so many years. It's just that this enemy is internal. There are bomb attacks, threats, all sorts of killings going on, but I just don't see this realization that we're at war. Everyone seems so complacent and at ease. And what you've been saying about India, if there's only just one bomb attack from India at our border, we would be at war. Why aren't we at war today?
Thank you. Let's do a bit of gender balancing again. So there's the lady in the front, yeah, in the green top. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, yes. Tell us who you are and.
I am Nadia. I did my MA from Boston College just now. I'd love to meet you. So I'm Minister of Education now. First thing I do is support some of the homegrown solutions that are coming up in terms of schooling and education.
Do you want to just raise your voice a bit? Yeah,
can y'all hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Here in school and
just move the mic a little bit closer.
Is
there
that
we
better?
Are. That's better.
Oh wow. Yeah, Kiran School, Nazar School, the Behbood schools, the schools that come up, homegrown solutions, because a lot of development research shows that is where the effective progress lies. Not necessarily from top-down, although top-down can work as well if you are partnering up well with outside organizations, such as has been happening in Punjab with the roadmap, for example, so I would support that as well. I would set up a task force to create a think tank for thinking about education, curriculum, and pedagogical methods that are going to be used. And those are probably the first three things I would do.
See, is there anyone in this audience who thinks, just given how we all complain about government schools and none of us would ever send our children within 1 million miles of a government school, probably in this audience I suspect, is there anyone who thinks that the state's better just funding but not carrying out education? Anyone in this audience who thinks that? Yes, gentleman there at the back.
With regard to your earlier proposition, I think the government needs to sanitize itself.
Would you like to tell us your name and where you're from?
My name is Adil Ahmed, I am a journalist. The government needs to sanitize itself of this, urge to control. It needs to mature to a point where it is willing to exercise it across the board. There's lots of good people here who are being needlessly micromanaged. They need to be given a loose rein.
Faisal, do you think that actually a better option is for the government to fund but actually to outsource the management of?
No, I also do feel the same like our friends and colleagues. Education must remain the responsibility of the state. The commercialization, we talked about public knowledge, private learning. And, we also didn't talk much about on the higher education side as well. You compare the number of universities. Let's make a positive comparison with India and China. Very little. And look at the youth cohort, 63% under 25, which is the 7th largest youth cohort as well. I do agree with what the lady said and what the gentleman said, the journalist, and everybody else. Allow standards, allow funding, also support and promote local indigenous homegrown solutions. The government, non-governmental, look at DFID. Let's look at DFID and British Council, the kind of work they're doing in different provinces in Pakistan. That work needs support. The work that somebody mentioned, the rights of the parents to send their child to school, the advocacy, the education, the awareness aspect of it. And that's what the whole part is. If you look at a government school has a school management committee. And the SMC is strengthened enough to make responsible a response to the community and its effectiveness. There are lots of challenges. Simple answer, everybody has to work together and on a certain set of standards. Government should allow for schools, organizations, institutes, and literacy centers to whom. I remember 4 years ago, Dr. Ishrat Husain, once he was invited as a guest lecturer, and he said to my teachers that he was asked by somebody in the World Bank that what is the best return on $1 invested. So you said that. He said the best return on $1 invested in Pakistan is on female education, because education for women is not just teaching and learning, it is about generation. So, we have to look at things from a larger perspective, and I agree with everybody what has been said.
Just on that question, Dr. Ishrat, do you think, again, given the extent of your own immersion in this field, that one option may be for the state to fund private providers and other community schools and groups of parents and teachers coming together? And
I went to Mughalpura, which is a low-cost locality of the railway employees. There was a government school and there was a private school. I asked the students, who is your father? Somebody is a welder, somebody is a mechanic in the Moghalpura workshop, getting very little salary. How are you in this private school? They said, we get 300 rupees scholarship from the Punjab Government Education Foundation. So the most of the education in that school and several of other schools in this low income community was being provided by the private teachers who were tested for their competency, and the funding was being done by the government. Now this is a choice which you are given. So there was no discrimination between a high income family and a low income family. Children of both the parents were going there. And that is the homogenization we need in this country. There should be no discrimination between the low income and the higher income. That is the only way Pakistan can emerge from this elitist economy for which I wrote my book in '99, and things have actually gone worse.
What's the title of your book for the audience?
Pakistan, the Economy of an Elitist State.
So we're in a literature festival, Pakistan, the Economy of an Elitist State.
Published by Oxford University Press.
Please buy.
Yeah.
There we go. Aasim, it sounds from what our two colleagues here are saying is that there's some sense. So if you didn't have an ideological opposition to the private sector carrying out certain state obligations, would you have a difficulty with this?
I mean, yes, I would, if only because I think that, you know, like I said, I mean, I suppose you could argue that this is a conceptual discussion that has no place here, but I think it does actually have a place here. You know, the question for me is in some ways quite straightforward. If it is a universal value, quality and education for all, across all the social divides that exist, especially class and gender and ethnicity in this country, then I think that, you know, if perhaps my understanding of capitalism and the private sector is dreadfully flawed, then sure, it's okay, it's a good idea. But if the history of the world over the last 500 years tells me anything, it's that the private sector never provides except to earn a buck. It's raison d'etre, right? That's why it exists. It doesn't. Its fundamental objective is not to serve humanity. Let's be clear. That is a positive externality in economist language. You know, that's not why it's out there. You know, the firms are out there to minimize their costs and maximize their revenues so they can, you know, operate at the best possible margin. If we find that there are private providers of education who operate along different lines, perhaps, and one could argue, you know, that's sort of the NGO model. Now, that again then would require me, I mean, this is what I do, I suppose, but, you know, it requires me to think critically about, okay, why are NGOs doing this? What are they out there to do? What kind of purposes are they seeking to serve by perhaps operating at a not-for-profit logic? And I'm not saying there's any insidious designs per se, but I do think that there's something to be said for the fact that even, I mean, it's all good and well for us to talk about universal values, but I think that there is something to be said for the fact that states, as opposed to, let's say, not-for-profits, which have sort of rather apolitical, you know, value, sort of sense of what values are. You know, states, on the contrary, as I said, if they can be ideological and train us to be, you know, to hate and to think about them and us, everything in terms of them and us, then they can also teach us to do something different. I just want to give one example. Now, this is a crucial example for me because, sorry, I'm going to have to hold your hand there. This is a crucial example because it's practical and it tells me something other than sort of the classic neoliberal model.
Go on then. Be brief.
It's brief. It's
I know
very
it's
brief.
hard. You're a social scientist.
In contemporary, even in contemporary Cuba, taxi drivers and doctors earn the same amount of money, and they grow up in a state educational system where they are not taught, oh my God, how could that be? For a taxi driver to earn the same amount of money as a doctor? God forbid. In fact, they're taught that, look, all sorts of work is equally valuable, and as long as it contributes to the overall societal welfare, that's a good thing. And I don't think that that's that. Now, we can debate and all sorts of stuff about, but it would be the same sort of debate about, you know, the kind of education and values that is imparted by NGOs or imparted by Western states or imparted by India. You know, there's always a debate. It's always a normative question. So all I'm suggesting is that's something that the state can do if you do have, you know, sort of coordinated mechanisms to do so, in which it's both, there are accreditation bodies, there's quality control, there's also sort of some sense that things can be done in a decentralized way.
I was wondering how long it would take before we'd get the word normative in a debate. I'm afraid you can't, because I'd like to give the last word, because we are pretty much out of time. We've got a few minutes left. I'd like to give the last word to the members of the audience. So let's have one of each. Lady there on the left in the glasses, yes. And then the gentleman there on the right in the blue shirt, yes, you, sir. So if you keep your hand up, then the mic can come, and yes. You have to wait, I'm afraid. The lady's going to be before you. Yes, thank you.
Hello, my name is Ania Ali Khan, and I'm a journalist. And I just wanted to say that I feel like a big part of the problem with education, and I've studied in Urdu medium school and in an English medium school.
Should I just get the mic a little bit closer? Yeah.
Sorry, is the disconnect. So we study, and we're studying examples, and we're studying in books things that don't really relate to our immediate environment. These are not things that we think we can apply immediately. You know, I speak to like my classmates or the people I've interviewed over the course of my career, and they talk about learning English or learning things that will take them maybe out of this country or you know, to a place where they're out of their environment. But I'm just saying, in terms of, you know, learning things that we can immediately apply outside, that's a big disconnect, and I don't know why that is.
Thank you for that point. It's not quite intended that way. Thank you so much for your participation. It's been, I've learned so much. It's been hugely. Thank you to Faisal. Thank you to Aasim. Thank you, Dr. Ishrat. And from me, goodbye.
Thank you.
Sorry about the smash and grab.